Welcome to the Blindian Brown Girls podcast, where we explore life, love, and the beautiful blend of cultures. I'm Aumatma, a holistic fertility doctor.
And I'm Tanya, an intercultural relationship coach. Join us for candid conversations where we share our unique perspectives and stories about growing up as children of immigrants, navigating mixed-race relationships and motherhood, entrepreneurship, money, and so much more.
Get ready for real and raw discussions as we dive into the intersections of our lives, relationships, and our diverse experience. Welcome back, everybody, to the Blindian Brown Girls podcast. That's right. We claimed our name. If you didn't know, we're the Blindian Brown Girls. We started with that idea, but we were just testing it out for a little while, which is why you never heard us say, welcome to the Blindian Brown Girls podcast.
Now here we are, claiming our space in the podcast world.
It's a very exciting day.
So we were just discussing, what we're going to talk about today, because we come on here sometimes and we're just ready to chat. I think that's like the most organic and natural way that people interact with each other. So I was saying to Aumatma that I am so curious about her work. And I think it's something that's super helpful for everybody to hear about, whether you are struggling with fertility or not struggling with fertility, if you plan to be a parent, or if you even are a parent. Just some of the layers of, it's not just, I'm sure, the fertility portion itself. I'm sure you see so much more nuance with the relationships and the individuals. And so I'm curious, one, how, we talked a little bit earlier on in one of our earlier episodes about how you sort of naturally found your way into this space, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper and learn more from you about your experience yourself and how you moved into this space, claimed it, and how you help people. And, what are some of the things that you see? So
yeah.
wherever you want to start.
Okay.
Tell me all.
So we touched on it early on. I kind of came into it because of my own story and my own questions around if I was with the right guy and did I really want to get pregnant with him, and following my intuition, which tends to come up in our podcast a lot. So I ended up, and actually we didn't, maybe the piece that I didn't touch on was I was simultaneously in these business coaching programs that literally this teacher, every time he would go on stage, he'd be like, find your niche, claim your niche. And I was like, yeah. And I just rolled my eyes, right? Because at that time I was a women's health doctor. I did everything. And literally the irony is that I had never seen a fertility person in my life.
That is amazing.
So I was 4 or 5 years into my career, never worked with a fertility person. Lots of hormone imbalance, lots of PCOS, endometriosis, everything surrounding fertility, but no one specifically that was hey, can you help me get pregnant? So it was a little bit what? And then every time he would say niche, fertility would pop into my head uncontrollably. Amazing. It wasn't an intentional oh, I'm thinking about fertility. Yeah. It was just fertility.
Wow.
And I was oh my God, this cannot be real. Who the freak am I?
Yeah.
Doing this? But I knew that I was doing so much research in it that I had a lot of ideas, and I had a lot of, actually, I was irate at the fact that women have been strategically and systematically lied to for most of our lives. And I don't know if you experienced this, but our women's health education in school was pretty nominal.
Yeah, I can't even remember, honestly, what they told us.
And even medical school taught us that fertility drops off of a cliff at 35. I trace that myth. It is, in my mind, it is completely a myth. I traced it back all the way to the 1800s in France, where churches were recording when women would bring their children in to get baptized. So the drop off is 35. They're like, oh, women over 35 are not bringing children in to get baptized.
My God.
So fertility must drop off of a cliff at 35.
Oh my goodness.
So 1800s France.
Wait a second. What was the life expectancy in the 1800s in France? Like 50?
Yeah,
So
like
what 35-year-old woman at that time
please tell me.
was bringing her kid into the baptized?
That's exactly my first thought. I'm like, wait, so if it started back then, why have we not questioned this through science
That
at
is
all?
incredible.
There is maybe 3 research studies that are more recent. They're very small scale studies. But like, why don't we have massive scale studies on something that we base everything on? Right. So this was my experience as I was going through all the research. I was like, what the hell? What the hell? What the like I just couldn't stop being in this like what the fuck mode for a long number of months. And then I just started telling women about it and they were like, what the fuck? Like why are we not taught this? And so like because of this crucial foundation, like that is the myth that all of the fertility world is founded on. So if we think of it as a pyramid and the foundation is whack, like I don't have a better word. Like this is not science.
Yeah.
Yet everything you do, you claim is science, then I'm sorry, you don't have a pyramid.
Yeah.
Right? So they're
Like, what are you
telling
building
women,
on?
like, freeze your eggs. Your fertility drops off a cliff at 35, freeze your eggs. Your fertility drops off of a cliff at 35, you can't get pregnant, go to the IVF clinic. Like everything that we are telling women to do is based on this myth. And doctors are getting worse. I've talked to women that are like 32. There was a woman, I am thinking of a woman, 32. She had been through 9 IVF cycles.
At 32?
At 32. She started at 30. So in that 2-year period, she'd been through 9 cycles at 3 different IVF clinics.
Oh my God.
And like, I'm talking to her, my heart is breaking because she's only 32.
And like,
Her
what was that doing to her
body, her hormones.
and just her like belief in what was possible for her?
Exactly. So all of that, like she's telling me her whole story. And I'm literally like weeping, right? Because like every doctor that she had been through to in those 2-3 years had told her it was her age. And
At 32?
at 32.
And
So
at
she's
30,
nowhere near 35.
Yeah, like at 30 because she started at 30. So like
29-ish going to all these doctors. Wow. At 30, she did her first IVF cycle and then 2 years to doing those 9 cycles. At 3 different clinics. She had talked to maybe like 10, 12 different doctors. And literally every single one said, oh, it's your age, it's your egg quality. And the reason I was weeping is because she's telling me the stats. This woman like had memorized every single thing because she's talked to so many doctors.
And she's so invested in it.
In this cycle, we retrieved this many eggs. This many turned to embryos, this many turned to day 5 embryos. So she like had the whole map. And I'm looking at, I was writing all of it down and I'm like looking at the graph and I'm like, literally every time they introduced the sperm, the numbers just tank. Like your embryo, like she didn't get any embryos out of it. And I'm like, it's the sperm. Like, it's the sperm. It's not you. It's not your age. It's not your hormones.
Wow.
And she was like, what? And then she starts crying. She's like, no, literally no one has ever tested the sperm.
Oh my, what?
She's like, one doctor once tested the sperm, said it was normal, and that was it. I'm looking at his sperm, and I'm like, they look okay, but did they do a DNA fragmentation test? Did they do other tests on this man? Because there is no way your hormones are optimal and they're retrieving plenty of eggs. They were getting like 20 eggs in each cycle. So no, it's not your freaking age.
Okay, give me some context.
It's 20 is
Is that a lot? Is
like
that a little?
nothing.
Oh, okay. Like, I have no idea.
So
That sounds amazing.
add 20 is amazing.
Okay, that sounds very favorable.
Yeah, and for her age, it's really good. But then they would end with like 2 or 3 embryos, which is like problematic, right?
Okay.
So out of 20, we want to get at least 10 of them turned into embryos. That's a good ratio.
Okay.
When it's less than half, I'm thinking something's wrong there.
Gotcha.
It's either egg quality or sperm quality.
Okay.
So after analyzing her whole case, I was like, I'm sorry. I'm very convinced that it's the sperm. You need to talk one doctor into doing DNA fragmentation or just pay for it yourself.
Right.
And she wrote me back a month later and she was like, you're completely right. The DNA fragmentation is so beyond anything that they expected.
Wow.
And thank you so much.
Wow.
So it blows my mind that we think it's okay to tell women that it's their age when we know there are plenty of women that get pregnant over 35
Oh my God.
that have completely normal, healthy pregnancies.
Yes.
But it's like because this myth is so prevalent and so like entrenched in everything that fertility doctors do,
Mm-hmm.
it defaults to age when they can't figure out the why.
What it is, right.
But the problem is like who's looking at all of the pieces?
Right.
Who's looking at not only the physical but the emotional pieces, right?
Yes.
Like how stressed out is this woman?
Yeah.
How stressed out is this couple?
Yeah.
Is this man living a healthy life?
Yeah.
Do they have a healthy relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Which are all factors in
Absolutely.
whether or not they're going to get pregnant. There was another couple that had the guy was super resentful to the woman. This was probably like 7 or 8 years ago now. And luckily, like I used to do appointments on Saturdays. There was a time in my life
Yes.
when that was a thing. And they're coming in on a Saturday morning. So I was like, okay, I'll be done in an hour or two. This couple was in my office for 7 hours.
What?
7 hours. We did not stop. I just like sat there and held space because they were completely having it out. He was like,
In front of you?
yeah, like he was resentful. He was angry. He was like, I want to have 3 kids. I wanted to start 5 years ago. We've been married for 12 years or something like that.
So it was her fault.
So, yes. So he was like super upset about it. And I was like, okay, y'all are going to need to figure out if you're staying together before we support fertility.
Absolutely.
Like,
Oh
we
my
need to figure this
God.
shit out.
Can we just take a small mini break to talk about the fact that children are not going to save your marriage, says the relationship code.
Oh my God.
Children
yes.
are not going to save your marriage. If your marriage is falling apart, you should probably take that as a sign from the universe as to why you're not getting pregnant. Like, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there is this, no, luckily, like not too many couples have come in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are like, seem happily in love and like,
They're trying to work through this and figure it out.
Child to like be the expression of their love and all that. But this couple, and she wasn't trying to save her marriage necessarily. She's like, I'm really clear on who I am. I didn't want kids. I didn't want kids back then. Sorry. Like, I don't feel apologetic about it. She was like really strong in her stance. And I was like, yeah, go you. But also I understand his resentment towards all of it.
Yeah, but you know, that's something that they should have figured out before coming to the table in front of you, right? Because if he has all this past resentment and she's still unsure whether this is where I mean, that's a huge burden to place on somebody who doesn't want that for themselves. Right. I mean, a child is like a lifelong commitment in a different way. Like the man could go, but the kids can be there.
Totally.
So that's like such unfair pressure put on her as well, which I imagine was part of the.
Yeah. It was a lot of the problem and a lot of the conversation, and she had a whole baggage of fear around childbirth. So I do like some funky stuff, and we trace that fear all the way back to like 3 lifetimes ago or something, where she actually died of childbirth, and
Oh, wow.
she was like feeling that fear in her body. She meaning her spirit.
And I understand it. I understand it because I believe.
And they're Catholic, so they were like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Oh my God. Okay, hold on. I need to know more about that because that's got to be, for me, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But like,
Right?
understanding that for many people, this is beyond their scope of belief, their scope of what they've been exposed to. Like, so how did she receive that?
Well, I was like, listen, I know your background, I know your religion. So the way that I phrased it wasn't even like a past lifetime. It was more like you energetically are resonating with the all of the women that have died in childbirth. There are so many of us that have died in childbirth, right? So it wasn't a unique experience, especially if we think about like 200 years-ish ago, like that was a very normal experience. So,
which is blows my mind. Which, hold on, just real quick, I just want to say, like, 200 years ago, but childbirth, I think we also minimize what the woman's body does and what we are, the fact that we have an entire human growing inside of us that we then put out into the world. Like, can we just take a moment and just appreciate what our bodies do? It's incredible. It's incredible.
I think the first time I learned about the development of embryo conception, embryo to like full on human being that's going to be born, like that journey is incredible.
Yes.
Incredible. And all of the things that, and I'm not even going to put it out here, but there are a lot of things that can go wrong along that path. And I just was like in tears that there are so many children on this planet. So the fact that we as a human species have survived for this long, and that we are procreating
continuously. Some of us more than others in India.
Yeah.
For example.
Well, but to believe it or not, like there are some myths around that. Like India, Black women, Black men, there is a belief system that we are uber fertile.
Oh, that the fertility is different, like our level of fertility.
Yeah, like there's actually, what did I read about this? There is a study that showed that doctors responded differently to Black women coming in and saying that they were struggling with fertility than white women.
I can understand that.
And of course, there's a bias in women's health in general. But there's this belief of like, oh no, you'll be fine. You're okay. It's all good. And similarly, like we think, oh, India is like super fertile. And I'm curious, I'm going to look this up now. I'm curious if fertility rates are dropping off in India. My sense is yes. Probably, yeah. So even though we do have like an overpopulation problem in India, the numbers are declining a lot.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like for me, that my perspective on that has anything to do with fertility more than we already are an overpopulated nation who then is procreating. Even if you have one, you're adding. If all of the millions and billion people have one, then there's But yeah, I never thought of it from that perspective. But it makes so much sense that you would say that there is a perception that I think just in general that Black people are super fertile and they procreate like without having to think about it. And it goes along with the bias and the stereotype that, there's a lot of children, seeds spun out here in the world, which it's completely a myth and not true, people. But interesting because I think what we see in the media and so on is white people struggling with fertility because they probably are the ones who are more vocal about it. And, the spotlight is more so on them in general, right? Yeah. Like same thing with I think mental health and seeking support. People very much have this idea that that's for white people.
Right.
That's not for us.
Right. And I think the other part of it is like a lot of the services are unaffordable by people of color, right? Absolutely. So if you're spending 20 to 30,000 per IVF cycle, most clinics publish their success rates based on 6 consecutive cycles. So that's $120 to $180,000 that you.
What are you even saying right now?
Yeah.
That's how much money people are dropping
Yes.
on IVF? All right, so what's another way? Because clearly you do it a different way and have had a lot of success doing it like that. So just talk to me a little bit about your process. Like, what does that look like and what makes it, I mean, it's vastly different, of course. And as somebody who is, very sort of conscious of their own wellness and mental, physical, emotional, all of the things, like I know how much of that contributes as a factor, to not, and listen, you can get pregnant naturally and still those factors can affect the growth and development of your baby as well, right? So just like what is the process? How is it so vastly different and why is that important?
Yeah, let's talk about it. So the first thing I'll say is that the IVF approach is basically like, let's take your eggs, let's take his sperm, put it together, reinsert it, plant the embryo, all is well. Okay. The way they get the eggs is a lot of hormones. And the way they put the embryo back requires many hormones to continue because it's an unnatural way to. The body doesn't make 20 eggs in one cycle. It will develop or it will start to develop, but there's usually like a week in, the body's already picked the queen follicle. So then it will put all of its energy into that one follicle instead of supporting 20 to keep growing. Instead of IVF, which is basically like, you have 20 follicles that are like ready to go. We want all of them to develop fully, and we want to take all of those out of your body so that we can it's a numbers game. So if they can get 20 eggs, then we have 20 chances that one of those eggs is going to fertilize into a healthy embryo.
Okay, I have so many questions, even just on that.
Let's do it.
Because, okay. I'm going to sound super basic.
No, I love it because I don't know what the question.
Yeah, I'm like fascinated by this. So in a natural pregnancy, if I was to get pregnant naturally, so I'm ovulating, my body is producing. It's releasing one. Okay, that's the natural body's process. Okay, now I go to get IVF because I have not been able to naturally get pregnant. I go and now there's 20 follicles, you call them. Okay, those are
they're basically eggs that are still
like pre-egg. Pre-egg. Egg. Okay. So there's like 20 pre-egg like follicles. And now those are all getting implanted in.
No. Okay. They're not implanting all of them. So instead of the body saying, hey, we're choosing this follicle to become the queen egg or the queen follicle, the doctor that's manipulating your body is saying, we're going to give you enough hormones to grow all of them.
Okay. Okay. So now my body is into like egg producing overdrive.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
And now I'm, not to, I'm not saying this to offend anybody, but like now my body is overproducing essentially unnaturally.
Yes.
Overproducing eggs.
Yeah.
And what is that doing to my body? Because that feels very strenuous even just to think about. Like if I'm already going through what I'm going through with one egg every month, right? Like what is the development of 20? Yeah, like
a lot of energy, right? So I think a lot of people are discounting the fact that this process in and of itself is a burden, to say the least, right? Like you need an exorbitant amount of hormones that they're pushing into you, but you also need an exorbitant amount of nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
You need like an overabundance of energy if you're going to get good follicles out of this, right? So what a lot of people don't plan for is how are you supporting your body during that time? Right.
What are you doing differently?
Time off. They're not like, oh, I'm just gonna like lay on a couch and chill and spend all of my energy making these follicles.
Yeah.
They're still working, still doing their life, still and
Probably eating the same, the same arguments with the partner, the same running after, right. Okay.
and simultaneously like pushing their body to the edge.
Even further.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and you won't see it in one cycle because your body can probably handle one retrieval. The retrieval is the part where all the 20 are developed, theoretically, and then they go in and pluck them.
Dude.
They go up and they're like, boom, 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 let's get them all.
And they then take them out of your body.
Yeah.
Okay, like, I have a general idea. I am a grown woman in the world, but I've never really thought so deeply about it. And, obviously I'm very fortunate and privileged to have not had to think about that. But okay, so now they're taking all of those 20 that they've implanted. Are they only taking what's viable or are they taking everything out?
They just have to
They have to take everything out because nothing can be in there.
There's always going to be, let's say there's going to be a percentage that didn't really develop, even with the hormones. So they have a cutoff. It's 18 millimeters. So the follicles have to be at or above that size for them to pluck the follicles.
And it hasn't grown to that size. It remains and your body just naturally sort of expels it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't even expel it. They just kind of like dissipate and disappear. which is what our body's doing.
Anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
So, because is our body like, what the fuck? Like this is a lot, dude. Like, is our body saying that? Like, because it feels like, if I just was to attach like a third arm over here to my shoulder, my shoulder would be like, what in the world? Like, this is extra weight. This is extra burden. I'm not quite sure what to do with this. Like,
I feel like it's a lot. Granted, I have not been through it personally, but I feel like it's a huge burden.
Okay.
And it's very depleting. So women come out of this and honestly, like, I feel like if they are going to go through this process, take a freaking break. Like, don't go from retrieval to transfer a week later. Like, that's just, your body's not recouped enough to do that.
Okay.
But yes, I agree. It's a lot. I think it's a very masculine approach. It's like, how do I control your hormones? How do I control more of these eggs to grow? And how do I get them all? Like the overachiever hustle culture applied to the female body.
Okay. So once they're retrieved, right? So now they've been retrieved, whatever has grown to 18 millimeters. And then what?
So they're retrieved, then they go on to the next step. So at that point, the man has already donated his sperm. They have hopefully vials full of the sperm, and they will basically put each egg in its own petri dish that is introduced to the sperm. And then the sperm go and do their thing. So they'll put more than one sperm in each dish. So still to a certain extent we want that survival of the fittest. Like the sperm should,
The strongest sperm of the ones that they put in there should.
and there's a bypass. So like that's the ideal if you're going to do this option. Ideally one of the sperm is strong enough to like fertilize that egg.
Okay.
But if not, meaning we already know like the motility is low or morphology is low, then there's a bypass for it, which is called ICSI, intracytoplasmic blah, 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 blah. And it's basically like going and inject the sperm into the egg. So a needle like breaks through that protective layer that the egg has. So the egg has this is the fascinating part. The egg has a shell around it that a sperm has to like navigate to and through to fertilize the egg. That's the protective layer around the egg. So this is the part.
So the egg's like, it can't just be anybody.
Yeah. The queen.
Yeah, hell yeah, as she should be.
Do you deserve to be?
Exactly.
So theoretically, the sperm don't need to do that much work. Like there's an egg and there's hundreds of sperm. Hopefully one of them will find the egg and fertilize it.
Okay.
And then let's say they got 20 for the sake of like easy math. They got 20 follicles. They, on average, maybe 10 fertilize, like 50% ish. When more than 50% fertilize, that's really great. Okay. So like we've supported people through the IVF cycle process, and there are people that have been through a cycle after cycle, work with us, and then they go on to do another IVF round after. And what they'll come back with is like, oh, like out of 20, 18 of them fertilize. And we'll be like, hell yeah. Wow. That's what we want to talk. That's what we're talking about. Okay. So if you're going to do the process, how do you optimize each step of the process? Gotcha. Because like, why waste your money if you haven't optimized?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're supporting people through that process as well. If that's what the route they're choosing to take.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like most people don't need to, most people don't want to, but we have a lot of high achieving women that are like, screw that, I don't have time to wait. Like I don't have time to wait for the natural pregnancy to happen. I just want to be pregnant and be done with it. Got it. It's like, okay, well, we've optimized your hormones, we've optimized your nutrients, we've like done all of the things that we can do before they even walk into the clinic. And then through that cycle process, like, how do we make sure that we get the best outcomes? Best case scenario. So yeah, okay. So that's an option. It's not we can't control it as much because
part of the process is literally out of your hands. Yeah.
Yeah. But we find that majority of people will do better through the cycles. And ideally, we want them only going through one cycle. So we're cutting that time down, which most people don't understand, right? They're like, oh, this clinic has amazing success rate, which is like at best 30%.
Wow.
And they're like, oh, this clinic, and it's based on 6 IVF cycles. So 30% based on 6 cycles is
terrible.
A shit. Yeah.
Such a terrible success rate. I mean, you would never choose that for any other, like, but it's how they're marketing it, right? It's how they're selling it to you.
In clinics can skew the success rate. So I've seen clinics that say, oh, we have a 99% success rate. They've completely skewed the results with like, let's pull out anybody that had this criteria that didn't act.
And they're not telling you that, right?
So they have to publish the real rates to the CDC. everything else that they do, they can do whatever.
That's incredibly problematic.
Yeah. And the CDC reports that data anonymously.
Oh my God. So you can never really find out.
Yeah.
Like if you're a layperson, right? If you're just the person on the client end of things, right? And you're not invested in like the medical portion of it, right? Like if you're just trying to get pregnant. And our brains default to best case scenarios, right? Our brain wants to always, or that 99%, I'm going to focus on that. I'm not going to ask any questions because that gives me hope, right? Especially people who are struggling or challenged or, in some cases, I'm sure you see desperation even, right? So like the further along, I think the pathway, the journey you've gone and the spectrum you are in terms of desire, like to have the baby, because, I'm sure there are people like you mentioned before who are like going through the process and they're like, okay, if it works, it works. If it's not, it's okay. Yeah. And likely they probably have better success rates, right? Because they're a little bit less attached to the outcome. Yeah. Whereas people are really invested in this. So I feel like they're going to just hang on to the hope that any, positive sort of stat gives them.
Yeah. To that point, like I talked to a woman last week, 42. She has early ovarian failure. Basically, like her body doesn't have that many eggs left. So I looked at her hormones and like I was like, there's no way. Like we're not going to work with you unless we're working with you to optimize your health and body. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to work with you with any intention of getting pregnant because you have 0 eggs. Like none. You maybe have an egg or 2. So wow. If there are no eggs, you would think, like we tell people up front, like, I'm sorry, there's nothing for us to do here. And that's the conversation I had with her, much nicer. Yeah. But she's been through 4 IVF cycles.
And nobody told her that?
Tell me why they went through 4 IVF cycles knowing that there are no eggs.
That's horrible.
1 or 2 eggs per retrieval. If you push the body, sometimes it will produce, but none of them are actually turning embryos.
I was just going to say, like, and I'm sure those are not the most viable quality eggs. And
so the fact that there are clinics and doctors out there doing this kind of stuff, it makes me think, like, you spent $80,000 on 4 cycles of IVF, pushing your body beyond the edge, going through all the shit you went through with like maybe a 1% chance of death.
Oh my God, that's so painful.
So heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I, like so much of this world, I call it the fertility industrial complex. It's literally like, how can we make more money? Yeah. Right. And they don't care that women are going through these cycles for no reason. They don't care that they're spending money out of pocket. This is not insurance driven. So it really, like, it behooves people to think about things outside of that box, literal, like clinic box.
Yeah, I think the problem, is that so many of us are taught to believe everything that we hear from a doctor, right? Like it's a doctor, we have to listen, forgetting that doctors are people, doctors are trained differently, doctors have different belief systems, doctors have different life experiences, doctors have different sense of ethics and morals and, different motivations also. So, not taking away anything from all the great doctors, but there's a lot of not so great doctors out there who don't have the best intentions or may just not be as well versed or well researched or well, experienced in certain areas.
To a certain extent, I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. So I'm like, maybe this couple was like, we want to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And there are people that will say that, right? Like, we want to try anyway. Right. And in that case, I'm like, I told her to her face, I was like, you need an egg donor. There's no way around this. You need to get an egg donor. And she's like, I know, we're maybe thinking about it, but we don't have any like South Asian donors. I'm like, I wouldn't sweat it. Like, get whoever, like whatever feels okay for you, do that. Because the genetics is so different. Anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But like the South Asian piece, or a lot of like people of color are trying to find their same race, their same genetic makeup, kind of, because in some way that feels like it's going to be better.
Yeah.
The reality is 98% of our genes are the same between the two of us, and we're not related.
Wow.
So there's like,
So it's gonna be
that, like,
okay.
tiny little
Yeah.
percentage that's different, and most of a what a child looks like and is fundamentally like, energetically, emotionally, physically, mentally, is going to be based on what happens in the womb. So once people understand that, then like egg donation is not such a big deal.
So scary.
Yeah.
And out of
Yeah. So like, not POC, not South Asian, not African, whatever, like you don't need it to be that much.
Wow. Wow. Thanks so much. Okay.
So they've retrieved the eggs. Let's say they fertilized into what we call an embryo, and then they will grade the embryos. So then they have grade AA, AB, BB, all the way down. So they'll try to implant the best grade embryo first. And these days, I feel like most clinics are doing 1, maybe 2 embryos at a time. More money for them, I think. There are some women that I'm like, there's no way. Like, I'm lucky that one of the clinics that we refer to a lot is kind of out of the box sometimes. So we had this like 44, 45-year-old who got 24 eggs or 21, something like that, eggs retrieved, 18 of them fertilized. And they were like, let's implant 8. And this is a solo mom by choice. She was like, no, let's not.
Wow.
And they were like, you're 44. Like, most of these are not going to take.
And what if they do?
Right. She was really freaked out. So I think they ended up agreeing on like 3 or 4, and 1 took.
Okay.
So, and like, I don't know what happened to all of those embryos, but I remember getting a call from her clinic and they were like, what did you do to her? Like, how do we have a 44-year-old with 18 great embryos and all of them are great?
That's amazing. You're like, I did my job. I did what I do.
I don't know.
Yeah, so clearly what you do works.
Yeah.
So, okay, so now I understand a little bit more of the process of like what IVF looks like. Now tell me what you do. Say I'm now like a couple, I'm in a couple who's not going that route, and I come to you, I'm having trouble getting pregnant, or we're having trouble getting pregnant. What happens?
So far what we've talked about is literally at the level of the ovaries and the sperm, and that's it. Like, that's all fertility focuses on.
Right.
But we have a whole body
Yeah,
that influences what's happening at the ovaries and testes, right? So most of the time we're ignoring, fertility world kind of ignores everything else. They're like, we just know which hormones to manipulate to get the eggs to do what we need to do. Our approach is the exact opposite. We're like
the holistic fertility.
Yeah. We're like, well, there are at least 40 things that can be happening in your body that are influencing what's happening in your ovaries or testes. So let's figure out what those things are. Let's suppose you have toxins and you have like an overload of toxins, or you have a crappy diet, or you're super stressed out and have been stressed for years. All of those things are impacting your fertility. So the first thing is like being able to assess and understand, like, here's the big picture vision of what this couple is going through as a couple. What are the emotional factors? What is their home like? Do they have mold in their house?
Right. Like even environmental factors.
So many factors, yeah. So we want to like do a deep dive on the assessment piece and really figure out, why have you as a couple not been able to get pregnant? And it's no one's fault, but both of you are contributing to these outcomes. So both of you are responsible for taking charge of shifting the outcome.
Yeah, that's amazing. That actually is like so similar to my work, right? Because often we look at the pain, which for you is like not getting pregnant, but we don't look at all of the things that are the factors that are contributing to that thing, right? So it's like, okay, but there are so many different things going on with you two as individuals that are contributing to this conflict or the disconnection or whatever is happening between the two of you. Let's address those things and then we can fix this. So it sounds like a similar process. It's like, I think, again, we forget that there are, and I think our society doesn't emphasize a lot of this other stuff, right? When it comes to wellness, like now we're talking about it more, but we're still not talking about it, especially as it relates to fertility.
I don't think we're talking about it.
We're not talking about it enough. We've just started talking about it.
It's really common to be like, oh, I have a headache. Where's the pill?
Right. Grab the medicine. Right. Yeah.
And like, I've had people come in and be like, oh, we're supernatural. And then you like dive in and you're like, wait, you're on painkillers.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that for? They're like, oh, I like my shoulder hurts all the time, so I just take that.
Yeah, it's just routine and they don't realize.
Put it to the side, like, what impact does that have on everything else? And it's like, well, we're an integrated human. Everything affects everything else.
Right.
And it's kind of hard because it can feel like, oh, that's so overwhelming or that's so big. Like there's so many things that I have to think about all the time. But the reality is, your liver congestion or too many toxins that are clogging up your liver, connected to your inflammation, connected to your fertility, that's not a big thing. Like the things that are going to support your fertility are also supposed to support the other two.
Yeah. And your whole body is going to be better and benefit if you address those things. Yeah. I think, looking at things holistically is a piece that the Western world has been missing for a very long time, that the Eastern world has gotten a lot more right. We've gotten a lot of things wrong too, but that piece, I think, understanding the integration of all of it and how, mind, body, spirit, like the connection and how, even things like stress, like we hear, oh, if you're stressed out, it won't happen. And then there's that joke, right? Like as soon as you stop thinking about it, then, you're going to get pregnant or whatever, or like, yeah. Right. It's like if you hate each other and you go on vacation, and if you go on vacation and drink like 40 like of those like what do they have at those all inclusive, those nasty like sugary nastiness, Bahama Mamas or whatever that nasty stuff they make, that's not going to help you change anything, right? And yeah, I think we like to band-aid our problems with easy solutions, and sometimes it does take a little bit more work.
And like, to be fair, like maybe sometimes that works. I've met women that are like, oh, I did so many rounds of IVF, I finally gave up, and then we got pregnant. And like, yes, those stories happened. But are you willing to rely on that? Is that something that you're okay with? And if you are, great. Don't come see me.
Right, exactly. Then you've got it figured out and you don't, yeah. Well, yeah, you see what else relaxing gets you in your life too, right? But I think even in that like thought, it's also like, okay, well, let's not then negate, well, what did it take for you to relax, right? What things changed in your life? Maybe you let go of some things. Maybe you moved out of overwhelm. Maybe you left the shitty job. Like we forget to factor in all of the actual elements that have contributed to that thing. Yeah, and then we just end up and saying, well, I relaxed. Well, what did relaxing look like? What did that mean? Because
what does that actually
clearly something changed, right?
And like, it is those like deeper changes. You talked about the job that someone hates, right? Like, I have a client who asked me, should I quit this job that I hate? I'm like, dude, I am responsible for making these decisions. If you and your husband decide that you can quit this job, go for it. Like, I support you. But there are so many people that have been like ready. If, oh, all it's going to take is quitting my job, great, I'll do it. And then they're worse off because they're like, now I don't have
income, all the things,
like,
the routine,
and
I feel isolated.
that was supporting you in some way. So quitting your job isn't magically going to get you pregnant.
Right.
But if your job means that you have a better mental balance and you feel good about that and you have other things you're passionate about
To compensate. Right.
great.
Yeah. Or you go and get a job that you actually do like and that, does support you. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So I come to you, we're looking at everything holistically, myself, my partner, and we're optimizing our bodies and our minds for the process.
Exactly.
So then I imagine that takes a different amount of time for depending on each individual's.
I think it's shorter because you've heard me say like it takes about like in a year you can do like 3 to 5 cycles on average in a year.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And to put your body through that in a 1 year time, like there's a diminishing return on investment. The more cycles you go through,
well, your body, I'm sure,
your body not performing.
I can only imagine when your body's probably exhausted and you just keep putting this foreign sort of cycle. I don't even know how else to describe it, like a foreign process that your body doesn't naturally understand. Like you're forcing your body to understand this thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I can imagine that.
So that's about a year's worth of time. Most of the time you're doing like maybe 2 or 3 a year. Like it's still, and we're talking about the expense of that. Like you're paying for this out of pocket. So, so like you're not going to go through that many cycles in a year. Most people are not planning for that many cycles, right? They just get kind of shoved into it. So like, oh, this vision I have is I walk into the clinic, I walk out with a baby.
Pretty much, yeah.
But what people don't realize often is that the walking out with a baby is like 3, 4, 5, 6 years into the process. It's not like, oh, I like walked in and walked out.
Yeah. It's like you chose a baby off the shelf. Like
there's no factory manufacturing babies. It's like, it's a process. And for a lot of people, it's such a long journey. So people in their minds have created this idea of like, oh, IVF is faster. It's not. If you look at the average amount of time a woman spends in an IVF center, it's 2 to 3 years.
Damn.
So compared to that,
wow,
we're 4 to 6 months.
That's nothing.
And we've like in the process of it transformed your life, transformed your health, got you off of the fence on diabetes, blood sugar, inflammation, gut issues, like essentially
all of the shit that you were sitting in before.
30 to 35, 40 years creating.
Right.
We've reversed all of it. And now you're in a different place to go and get pregnant. And we've optimized your pregnancy outcomes. So we have in the 12, 13 years that I've been doing only fertility, we've had 5 pregnancy losses. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. And because the average is 1 in 3 women experience pregnancy loss.
And that's even just by natural means, right? Natural. Yeah. Wow. So that means that these bodies are fully like they are at their healthiest, most optimal to perform in any capacity. And this just happens to be about making a baby. But wow. Yeah. That's incredible. So you literally, it's a life transformation. It's like a holistic health transformation.
Yeah, it's definitely like, that's what we know that their bodies are going through. The hope is that they'll stick with it. Right? So,
post pregnancy, now we have the baby. Right.
Our goal isn't like, hey, we got you pregnant. Our goal is you had a healthy baby and you transform your life so that you guys can have a healthy family for the rest.
Yeah. And hopefully just even more awareness and mindfulness about, you know, optimizing yourself so you could be there for your baby, right? Because I think a lot of people, especially people who are struggling, and again, I don't know this from personal experience, but you know, the goal is the having the baby
Or getting pregnant.
getting pregnant. Yeah, like I got the pregnancy test, and then it moves to okay, having the baby, going to full term, especially if people have experienced loss and so on. Okay, now I have the baby. People forget that that's the very beginning. Like that's when it now starts. Now what you do with that baby, right? Like you gotta be present and healthy and around for that baby, right? And the baby needs to be present and healthy and around too. So, I see what you're describing to me is like just a lifestyle overhaul, right? And just a necessary one, especially for anybody, and especially those people who are struggling with something as, sensitive as fertility, like, recognizing that it is in their best interest to continue. And I would imagine if they see how well it worked for them, that they would want.
That would they keep going. Like keep going. Don't stop because you're like, oh,
Now I have. It's like when people lose the weight, right? Then they get to their like goal weight or whatever, and then they're like, oh well, I could just eat that shit again, and I could just grab that snack again, and then like okay, then slowly it starts creeping back, right? It's the consistency.
And that's human nature. It's just like we're gonna want to like go back to our literally everybody is like, oh, but that's my one thing.
Yeah.
It's my only one thing.
Yeah, it's only that. And my only other one thing, and my only other one thing. Yeah. And we make up stories in our minds as we do about so many different things. We can have a whole nother episode on all the stories people make up in their minds about the relationships that they're in. Because oh my God. Lots of stories around that. But yeah, like I would imagine that, you just kind of make up all the reasons why you can't, right? You can't give this up or you can't do this thing. Yeah. But then I guess the desire to achieve that ultimate goal has to trump that. Yeah.
And usually like fertility is great in that sense because like that motivation is so strong that people will most of the time take action. Mm-hmm. There's every now and then we have people that are like, nope, not going to take that action. I had this one guy who was like in a really poor state of health, like probably the worst that I've ever seen. Right. I could just tell from looking at him, my teammate who met him, she's like, I don't know, he's got like a weird dark cloud or something on him. Ooh. And we were basically like, yeah, that's not a good situation. We did a bunch of blood work that we normally do. He came back with 6 different diseases, like active diseases, off of just our blood test. And that wasn't even a deep dive. No, not aware of. And then we like go and explain all of this to him. He had diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, liver dysfunction. I can't remember what else. There was like 6 or 7. He was like 38.
What?
Yeah. So a South Asian man. And like so sad. So sad. So we're explaining all of this to him, and I was like, okay, this is going to require some massive changes. We know that there is a lifestyle that you've been accustomed to that has brought you to this point. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to change some things. And he was like, I will quit smoking pot, but that's it. I was like, your diet is shit. You drink like loads of alcohol every day. You smoke cigarettes. I'm like, the pot is probably the thing that can stay. If you take away all the other things, we'd be better off.
That is wild.
So and like 2 hours later of him being like, absolutely not, not doing that, not doing that. I was like, put your wife on the call, please. And I was like, listen, I'm sorry. I know you really want to have a child. She was like 32. I know you really want to have a child. And I know that you're married to this man, but the reality is not looking good. Like, he is on the path very close to the end of life. Like, I don't know how to say that, but this man is about to die.
Wow.
Like, there's no way. And I'm your doctor. Like, I'm not taking responsibility for this, especially when he's telling me to my face and he's hearing all of me say all of this. I was like, especially when he's telling me to my face that he's not willing to make any changes. He will not eat vegetables. Like, that's not a negotiable. In my world, you gotta eat.
Oh my God. How old are you? Like 8? Like,
Telling you, like, you have all of these diseases. Like, this is not even
so there's not
like
even a
you're
desire
borderline, you're like
Right.
headed down that
Yeah.
path. No, you have
you're like you're already there.
disease. And like, there's just no way.
Wow.
And he's like, but my sperm are fine.
Wow.
I'm like, there's no way in hell you should be reproducing. I'm sorry to tell you.
Goodness.
And I was like, you're fired. And this woman's like weeping because I'm her last hope. She's like, I've already done the IVF thing. It's not working.
Oh my God. How devastating.
This man is like the problem.
Oh my God. That's got to be, so hard for her.
Yeah. And I was like, my best advice for you is it's time to move on.
I'm like, yeah, find another man to have.
Like, it's literally time to move on.
Well, she might be moving on sooner than she had realized if he kept it up. Like,
And he probably kept it up. Like, I haven't talked to them since. I was like, here's a full refund. I don't want any of your money because I do not want this hanging over my head. Like,
especially if you've told them what it is, right?
it's not me. Like, this is not my job. This is not what I
If
do.
you have some kind of moral compass and are conscientious, conscionable, whatever, you know the word that I'm trying to say. How could you take that on, right? Knowing that you've laid it out, what needs to happen, you know that if these changes are made, that there is some hope. He probably just obviously didn't want the baby enough.
Right.
Like that wasn't motivation enough. Right. Who knows what the situation of their marriage or their relationship was.
And I don't know if they definitely immigrated here together. They maybe like had an arranged marriage or something. Okay. So it wasn't like a great situation. Yeah, she's probably like dependent on him to a certain extent. Yeah.
And probably scared to assert herself and advocate for what they need as a couple, right? That's something that I see in my couples often is usually it's the female partner, if it's a heterosexual couple, almost always it's the woman who doesn't know how to self-advocate or advocate for the relationship, right? And is always sort of defaulting to his desire or his schedule or his need or his demand or whatever it is, and you just start to minimize yourself. But when you're in a situation like that, when you're financially dependent or, you know, where you...
Yeah, and I don't know the full extent of their...
That's rough, man. Wow. That's a rough one.
Yeah, that was the worst that I've ever seen. Most people are like ready. They're like, tell me what to do, I'll do it.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is that essentially, like, you will shut it down if it's not something like, which is, I think, the right thing to do. Like, I've had couples come who are, you know, there's other things that they have to work out first, whether it's, you know, there's scenarios where the infidelity, like one partner won't stop. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I can't support you as a couple if there are...
If you want to keep doing what it is that you want to keep doing.
You know, like in couples therapy, for example, sometimes they will deal with addiction or things like that. Yeah. I don't deal with those things. As a coach, I think that is beyond, like, that is something that you need to go get treated for. And then you come back to me and we deal with this. And I will tell you that, like, I'm not going to be... We cannot do the work if you're just going to go out and get blasted tonight and then you're going to have the same conflict and it's going to be the same story. Like, there's no progress in that. So that's great that you're willing to tell people what it is, because it's for their own benefit. It's hard to hear, and hard to say, I'm sure, sometimes.
I will sacrifice our reviews for it, right? Like people will leave shit reviews because
They're mad.
I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't really help you. I'm not the best fit.
Yeah.
And then we have a negative review.
Yeah.
And we're like, really? Like I was in integrity enough to tell you that I don't want your money. Stop wasting your money.
Yeah.
And because it doesn't align with your need for getting hope,
Yep.
you want to badmouth me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
And then you're going to grasp onto the 99% success rate because it sounds good. And you have to do less work, right? But you actually, doesn't apply to you and you have to do more work. So, let's get our facts straight before we even, but yeah, that just, goes back to, sort of the human condition and what people want to, we will convince ourselves of what we want to convince ourselves of 100% of the time.
And that's where I feel bad for IVF clinics sometimes because I do feel like some of them want to be in integrity, but they're like, oh, but if I don't do this,
it's hard in the industry, right? Yeah.
They're going to badmouth me. It's going to be bad. So, like, for ease, some doctors will just cave and be like, okay, fine.
Yeah, it's up to you. Right.
You want to do another cycle? Let's do another cycle. Instead of being like, no, this is that would be bad medical advice, right?
Yeah.
Like, just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, that's just life. I think that's the shit we do.
Well, I have learned a ton about all things.
I loved all of your questions, by the way. I have to say, because I want to have conversations where I'm not only talking to other doctors, right? Like people that already know about fertility. It's a different conversation.
I'm sure it's a totally different conversation. And like, I think most of us don't know about the process. You just see it on TV or in a documentary or something like that, and you have a perception of what it is, but you don't really know what all it entails. And I think for those of us who don't struggle with fertility or have not had to think about it in that way, we don't really understand what people are going through and all of the different factors. Because listen, there are people who conceive naturally who are not in their best health, who are not taking care of themselves holistically. And so then, we assume that that's okay. Right?
But why can that heroin addict get pregnant?
Oh my God. Dude, I wonder that same thing. Okay. I do wonder that same thing.
I had an answer.
I remember when I was pregnant with Asaya, now like almost 13 years ago, it sounds crazy to say that, but I would be walking home from the train after work, and every day there would be a woman, I think she was either homeless or living in some sort of shelter, but she would be sitting on the sidewalk, very pregnant, chain smoking cigarettes. And I would walk by her every day and it would kill me slowly on the inside. And I was just devastated for her. I was devastated
The
for
future
baby,
child.
the
Yes.
baby who has no control over their circumstances, their environment, and the toxins that his mother is. But then I'm devastated for her because she clearly doesn't know better or can't do better or doesn't have resource or doesn't want to, which that in itself is a sad story if she doesn't want to do better for the baby. And I was like, it just used to kill me, like knowing that I had friends who had miscarried. I had friends who had difficulty getting pregnant. I had friends who have lost children. And I'm just looking at this woman every day, and it sticks with me because literally it was every day. We were pregnant at the same time. And as my belly is growing, her belly is growing. And I'm just watching her every day walking home, sitting there by herself, just chain smoking cigarettes. And I think about like what happened to her, what happened to that baby. Meanwhile, I'm over here just taking it for granted in a way, but like I would never, but I'm not having to, like, I don't have to deal with those circumstances, right? And I know better, and I'm more resourced internally and externally to do better. And so, yeah, it does make you wonder, like, how do some people just, no matter what they're doing to their body, addicts and miserable people and bad people, badly intentioned people, getting pregnant while these like lovely folks out here just want to have a baby. It just, yeah.
Yeah. I wish I had an answer.
Yeah.
I wish I knew. I wish I knew the ways of the world.
Yeah, it's one of those things. We have so many questions about those things.
like the way that I've reasoned it, and this is like more of a spiritual woo-woo belief system, but my thought is that the spirits that become our children choose us for whatever reason. Maybe it's karmic connection, maybe it's just like this is going to be a really hard life and it's going to teach me the lessons that I would need to learn.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I can say that there are spirits, like as spirit, there's not a filter on like, oh, this is bad and good and
Yeah.
it's just a lesson.
Yeah. I honestly believe very similarly to you in that way, where I think there are certain lessons and tasks and experiences that those spirits need to have in order to progress and become the next iteration, next version. And yeah, sometimes that is a difficult life for whatever reason. I mean, I think that's the only way for me personally, and it sounds like you too, to contextualize it, because otherwise it feels so out of sense, right? Like it just feels like, how can it be? It just doesn't feel like the natural sort of balance of the world, but it is the natural balance of the world at the same time, right? Like that bad has to exist for the good to exist as well. So yeah, and I think even for the people who are going through it, I think there's a lesson and a learn.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say, is like there's that. I see it a lot, and I'm working on a book on it, is really like the so many of the women that we work with are high achieving type A control freaks. And the shift that is needed in order to quote unquote relax is really this like deeper level shift of like what I call the feminine, like re-embracing the feminine. And I think that that is a call that a lot of women are awakening to.
Absolutely. I think that's a great topic for another episode, because I think, especially as many women of color, and especially coming from immigrant families, I think that feminine part of us is nurtured out of us to a large extent, but it also expected of us at the same time.
And it's like the weird dichotomy that we were brought up with. It's like, oh, girls don't do that.
Yeah, and as a girl, you should be this way, but you should also
be
a CEO by 25, like whatever it is. So yeah, I think that understanding how to navigate that can be very confusing for many of us, and contributes, I'm sure, to some of this experience with fertility and health and otherwise too. Well, this has been fascinating as usual. I'm like I learned so much. Thank you so much for like schooling me on all the things. And now I have, of course, I have so much better of an understanding of the process. And, I have a friend going through the process right now. And now I have a better understanding even of what she's going through. And, just what the industry is about at the, in general. Because again, I think, everything we learn is going to be beneficial for us, right? Whether we can help somebody or just for our own knowledge. And just even, I feel so much more grateful even just in having had this conversation for my own experience. I have more gratitude for being able to have conceived naturally and not had to go through, I've had my own set of challenges in other areas. Let's not get it twisted, but that wasn't one of them.
I feel like a lot of times women have the tendency to look at other women and be like, but she got pregnant so easily and blah, blah, blah. Like, why is it so hard for me? But the reality is like, they're going to have their struggles in other ways. And it's just like we as human spirits did not choose that specific struggle. We chose different struggles. We're all
struggling out here. We are all struggling out here, but we're all also all trying to make sense of it all, right? And what we can't control so much of those things. So the more we try to control it, I think the more it slips out of our grasp as well, right? We just have to be okay with having to learn the hard lessons sometimes, as hard as they are.
Amen.
Yeah. All
All right. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this session, this podcast.
This episode, this time with us hanging and chatting and learning all about all things fertility and holistic fertility. Thank you so much again for sharing all of your brain with me today. We will talk again soon.
The Blindian Brown Girls podcast, where we explore life, love, and the beautiful blend of cultures. I'm Aumatma, a holistic fertility doctor.
And I'm Tanya, an intercultural relationship coach. Join us for candid conversations where we share our unique perspectives and stories about growing up as children of immigrants, navigating mixed-race relationships and motherhood, entrepreneurship, money, and so much more.
Get ready for real and raw discussions as we dive into the intersections of our lives, relationships, and our diverse experience.